Welcome back to the Traders Network. I'm Michael Yorba, your host, broadcasting to you live from the Dallas KFXR 1190 AM Clear Channel studios. We're also streaming to you on yorbamedia.com. All right, first on the show today is Dr. Gil Van Bokkelen, and he has got a stock that is absolutely on fire. He is the CEO and chairman of Athersys. Gil, welcome to the show. I'm really impressed to have you on the show with us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to join you.
All right, mine too. You've got quite the background, a PhD in biopharmaceuticals. You were on the board of several very high-profile organizations. Why don't I just step down for just a minute and allow you a chance to introduce yourself to our audience, and I just can't wait for you to walk us through the litany of things that your company is doing.
Well, thanks very much. So my background is really kind of a blend of medicine and business. For the past few years, I've had the privilege of serving as chairman and CEO at Athersys. We're a public company that focuses pretty heavily in an area called regenerative medicine, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. I have had the privilege of also leading or being part of some organizations at the board level that are really at the forefront of some significant changes in medicine. And that's very exciting because I think that medicine around us is changing in some pretty important ways, and I think it creates some interesting opportunities, not only for patients and doctors, but also from an investment perspective as well.
Exactly. Symbol on your stock, ATHX, right?
Correct.
All right. You let's bring that out a little bit because chairman of the board of the governors for National Center for Regenerative Medicine was that 2010 through 2012. Also chairman of the Alliance of Regenerative Medicine, Entrepreneur of the Year Award, Blue Cross Blue Shield Visionary Business Award. I mean, you've really got some accomplishments under your belt. Tell us about your company. But before we get into that, you are on the cutting edge of major health trends globally. Talk to us about where that is going, and then we'll walk down that path.
Sure. Well, I think that there's several major trends in healthcare that are pretty interesting and that people should be taking note of. I think many people are probably intuitively aware of some of these trends already, but perhaps are not aware of just how significant some of them are or what the potential ramifications will be, or the types of opportunities that they might create from an investment perspective. The first key trend that I think people should be aware of is the major demographic shift that's happening here in the U.S. and in the rest of the world as well. So in other words, right now we're living through a pretty unprecedented shift in the population in terms of the aging global population. So that's key trend number one. I think many people understand that the baby boom that started in the mid-20th century is now causing a significant increase in the number of people that are entering what we typically like to think of as our golden years.
Right.
Just to put some numbers on this, between the year 2010, which is when the first baby boomers started to reach retirement age, and the year 2030, we're going to see a massive increase in the number of people over the age of 65. So in the U.S. alone, for example, in 2010, there were about 40 million people over the age of 65, but by 2030, that number is expected to increase by more than 80% to more than 72 million people. So that's a pretty big shift. The ramifications of this are also pretty significant and are directly responsible for the second major trend that I think people should be aware of. As we get older, data from institutions like the National Center for Health Statistics here in the U.S. or Health and Human Services tells us that we become much more susceptible to a variety of aging-related diseases and conditions, and this causes us to use much more in the way of healthcare resources. So specifically, as we get older, we spend on average about 3 to 10 times as much per year on healthcare as we do when we're young. So key trend number two is the substantially greater need or demand for healthcare resources, specifically in areas that have a high quality of life burden and a very high cost of care and support. So things like stroke, heart disease, neurological conditions like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, a range of inflammatory and immune conditions that increase in prevalence and severity among the older segment of the population. The third key trend, I think, is also something that plays into this. It's something that the American Medical Association has noted in the past few years with studies that they've published. The AMA has actually projected that within the next few years, we're going to be about 100,000 physicians short in the areas where we need them the most. So that, in conjunction with greater demand, really threatens to limit patient access to care. It's also worth recognizing that each of these trends are global, and while they're they reflect significant challenges. They also reflect some significant opportunities, specifically for companies that can develop new and more effective ways to address these types of healthcare problems.
You have some unique part to play in that. Bring that out for us.
Well, we're at the forefront of a pretty exciting area that is referred to as regenerative medicine, and there's some really interesting things going on both here at the company, but I think also more broadly in the field. I think people find the area of regenerative medicine pretty exciting because they see that it has the potential to really change the face of medicine as we know it. Regenerative medicine, in its the simplest explanation, is using stem cells or other types of therapies to stimulate the body's natural healing and recovery processes to help patients get better and get better more completely than they might be able to on their own. Some forms of regenerative medicine have actually been around for years, so things like stem cell transplants that have been used to treat leukemia patients or for other conditions. It's now well established that they have a tremendous impact on improving medical outcomes for many of these types of patients and their quality of life, but they also have a number of limitations. So in the case of traditional bone marrow transplants, these limitations are things like the need to carefully tissue match the donor to the patient, which frequently isn't possible, or the need to administer immunosuppressive drugs to the patients that are receiving the transplant. We've had a lot of success historically developing therapies in a variety of different areas, but effective, and when I say we, I mean globally the industry, but effective treatments for some of the most difficult challenges, so things like stroke and various forms of heart disease and other things that I mentioned earlier, coming up with effective treatments in these areas have really eluded us. And despite some amazing progress in some other areas, we really haven't been able to fundamentally address these types of conditions in the ways that we would like. The amazing thing about stem cells in regenerative medicine is that it appears that certain types of cells are capable of driving healing and recovery in multiple ways in parallel. So that's something that's fundamentally different from a traditional pharmaceutical, which is designed to only do one thing at a time. So cells are living entities. When we administer them to patients, they can actually drive healing and repair in several very powerful ways in parallel. Now, until recently, people didn't really know how to take advantage of some of these amazing new technologies that people are just becoming aware of in ways that were practical. And at Athersys, one of the things that we've done is we've developed an entire platform of regenerative medicine technology that revolves around a specific stem cell product that we call multistem that we think has some very unique and very powerful characteristics that we think could actually create a fundamental shift in medicine as we know it in some very important areas like stroke, like heart disease, some of the other areas, for example, in treating inflammatory bowel disease where we have a partnership with Pfizer. So that's a pretty exciting place to be because I think it has potential not only here in the U.S., but it actually has global potential. Other parts of the world, like Japan, for example, they just recently announced that they were creating a whole new regulatory framework that's specifically designed to promote accelerated development of regenerative medicine therapies like multistem, the one we're developing. And with respect to Japan, we made an announcement actually earlier this morning that where we talked about some very important patent issuances that we received in Japan that give us very broad coverage there. We think we're very well positioned. So we think we're really on the cusp of a big shift in medicine, and we think that that's something that investors have and should be taking note of. And it's something that we think could be very important just from a impact on clinical medicine as we know it.
You're not the only one because your stock is up 400% since looks like about the middle of November of this last year. I just saw an article flash through here off the street. You're one of the top 5 equities, top 5 companies in one of the hottest sectors that they've got going on. I mean, your stock is performing exceptionally well. Quickly, we've got about a minute left in this. Anything for the future, and also contact information for you?
Sure. The best place to go to get some additional information is to go to our website, which is just www.athersys, ATHERSYS.com, and there's contact information there and additional information about the company. I think we've got some very important catalysts coming up. We've got clinical studies that we're approaching completion and announcement of data around in the next several months. That's pretty exciting. I think we've got some other important things going on in terms of our relationships with other companies or collaborative partnerships with people out there that are excited about what we're doing. I think one of the reasons why we've been on such a roll for the past few months and actually over the course of last year and carrying into this year is because people are becoming aware of just how powerful regenerative medicine might be. If you look at an area like stroke, for example, if we can succeed there, it could really not only change medicine as we know it, but it could drive a tremendous amount of value for our shareholders. And that's something that we're really focused on achieving.
Yeah, well, you're doing it, and it's obvious with what's happening out there. I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show, Gil. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, my pleasure. Dr. Gil Van Bokkelen, ATHX, they're up over 400%. Athersys, or ATHERSYS.com is the website. That's where you can reach them. But I also want to put out the Traders Network has special thanks out to Monk Media and 1-800 Public Relations for all their PR and media support. Now, up next, another company, Matthew Lehman, CEO, Prima Biomed. Stick around. You're going to like this one, too. We'll be right back.